Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast, where we talk about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. We're the Thomas Brothers. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Jared. And today we have Aaron Boone on from Millennial Manliness. Aaron is a former pastor, and he shares an interesting perspective on manliness with us. And it's a great perspective of what kind of men God wants us to be. And he talks about, he shares 4 tenets with us, happens 4 P's of manliness, as we'll talk about, and they're really impactful, and it's really interesting to see from his perspective exactly what God wants us to be as far as masculinity and manlyhood. So let's go ahead and dive in.
All right, let's do it.
You can't climb the ladder of success with your hands in the pocket.
We will not go quietly into the night.
They tell me you're manly. True grit.
I am the one who knocks.
Don't ever tell me what I can't do, ever!
That's how winning is done.
All right, Aaron, thank you for joining us today. We've got Aaron Boone on, who's actually you're original North Carolinian as well, right?
Yes, sir. Born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina, so up in the mountains.
Nice. We're just a stone's throw over in Charlotte area. So technically I'm in Fort Mill, but Charlotte area.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Welcome to the show. Aaron has his own podcast called Millennial Manliness.
Mm-hmm.
He shares a lot of good stuff on there. And so, Aaron, we're really excited to have you on today to talk about a topic that really, I think, needs a lot of attention these days, and that is manliness and positive manliness, what that means to be a man for your family and for, I see pictures of your family there. You're a family man. Ethan and I each have 4 kids. And so it is I have 4 boys, and Ethan has 3 boys and a girl.
Yep.
Nice.
So, being a father figure and a role model is something that we are focused on. I think a lot of other people too. So I'm really excited to hear this conversation today.
So welcome.
Thank you for having me, guys. I really enjoy it. It's my first guest spot on a podcast, so if I don't do too good on it, then that's why, but I'll do my best on it and look forward to talking with you guys.
We pride ourselves in our editing skills, so you'll be good. Yeah, we'll make
Hey,
you look
there we
good.
go. Okay.
Yeah, we'll make you look good. So I think first, Aaron, I know that you have a pretty interesting backstory, and I think that kind of ties in with your whole story. So I'd like it if you could maybe walk us through your backstory, and then help us tie that into the broader conversation about masculinity.
Sure. Yeah, I was like I said, I was born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. Lived there 23 years. Being from there, being born there, I had a pretty normal start to life. Then around 10, 11 years old, my dad ended up leaving and divorcing my mom, and then my brother, who's half brother, I should say. And he was around 18 at the time. So he just left and did his own thing and never really heard from him again. And so from 10 on, it was me and my mom, and my mom's parents lived nearby. So we spent a lot of time with them, ended up moving in with them. And so during my formative years, I had no real, a father influence in my life. I had a couple men that stepped up at the church we were going to that mentored me to the best of their abilities, and just tried to fill in that spot. I had my grandpa for a couple years until he passed. And so we, having grown up with that, I strove, and my drive was to try to make everybody happy. I felt, looking back at it and sort of reflecting on growing up, I thought that my dad leaving was my fault somehow. And so I tried my best to make everybody happy. I wanted to say, okay, what do people think I should be doing with my life? Okay, I'm going to do that. And that's how I ended up actually going to Bible college and becoming a pastor.
Yeah.
Is because I thought that's what people wanted me to do. It wasn't for the right intentions. I completely thought it was, and was just trying to pursue it because everybody's like, that's great. We're happy for you. We're proud of you. And that just reinforced that drive for me to try to do that. And so as I continued through college, all 4 years, ended up meeting my wife my junior year of college. She came down as a freshman from Nebraska. And so I met her, and we ended up dating and then got engaged right after I graduated, and spent about a year and a half, 2 years back in North Carolina, thinking we were going to move up to the Maryland area to start a church with a buddy of mine, and ended up taking on a assistant pastor position here in Missouri, where I'm at currently. And through that, not knowing what the Lord was doing, but through that, I was able to truly understand that I was living a lie, because my whole 3 years as an assistant pastor were miserable. My wife, I would come home and my wife would just see that she's like, something's not right. She's like, you're just not happy. There's no joy. What is going on? I was going
to say, in the back of your mind, you're trying to put on this happy face and say, you know, oh, everything's great. But you're like, what did I get myself into?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I was trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes. I was like, okay, I just got to keep my happy face on, like you said, just try to make sure I'm enjoying. And I mean, I love the people at that church. We're still at that church currently. And so Thanksgiving,
was it just like the work of being a pastor or an assistant pastor? Just that work was grinding, or was it just because, I mean, imagine in that realm, I'm not sure what exactly that you were doing, but you're dealing with a lot of people's problems and helping counsel them. I imagine some of that is rewarding, but some of that is taxing. Yeah. Definitely taxing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it was rewarding to do it. We worked with the young people a lot, and I did a lot of the outreach and stuff like that. But it was just the fact that it wasn't what God called me to do. And that's just, there was no backing of that. Yeah. And so that's what just made it that grind, is just like I was fighting against what God wanted me to do by trying to do what I thought he wanted me to do. And so all that came to a stop around Thanksgiving of 2017, when basically God broke me down and said, look, you've got a choice. Either give up this facade, give up this lie, take this mask off, and do what I want you to do, or you're going to lose everything. And I was at the verge of losing my wife, losing my family, just everything was going to come to a grinding halt. And so
I want to make one thing clear. It's not that your facade was like you didn't have faith or you didn't believe or you had a faith crisis. It's just that you didn't feel like the job that you were doing was what you were meant to be doing. Is that correct? Or was it a faith crisis?
Well, it actually did. It did actually boil down to a faith crisis.
Okay.
I thought I was truly saved, but I wasn't. I never, there was no inner working of the Spirit that I could feel. And so
you're
it
going
really
through the
did boil
motions,
down
but you
to,
weren't feeling okay. Yeah. A lot of people do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it boiled down to that ultimatum where it's just clear as day. God's like, okay, this is your last chance. I've given you the last 18 years to try to get this right. And now here's your chance. And so I ended up having to step down from the position of assistant pastor. And to a degree, I was afraid, because I was like, oh, people now know. And now it's just like, okay, nobody's going to look highly upon me anymore. But at the same time, it was like, okay, now I'm actually free to do what God wants me to do. And I didn't know what it was at first. So I spent the next year and a half saying, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? I mean, we stayed at that church as active members, and we still are there. Still active in a lot of the things there. And so I picked up my job selling paint, and just making a living on that. But then I spent the last year and a half saying, Lord, what do you want me to do? And it wasn't until we have two kids. I have a daughter who's 6 and a son who is 3. And it wasn't until the birth of my son that the Lord really hammered home, okay, you now have a little man to teach, and you don't know the first things about being a man. And so that's what drove me to start Millennial Manliness, is having a son that now I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jared, you said you have 4, and Ethan, you said 3. So there you go.
Ours are still real little. So we're just getting into it, but definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll say my son's 3. So I'm just trying to get everything set up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just trying to get everything set up so this way, when he gets to that point, I've got some groundwork to go ahead and work with him on. And that's what led to what I'm doing. And honestly, working as a salesman, I travel across 3 different states. So I'm meeting guys from Kentucky, Illinois, parts of Arkansas, Missouri, and I'm seeing that a lot of these men are struggling with the same thing. And that's what led me to develop this 4-point system that I'm kind of coming up with on what true masculinity, especially from a Bible perspective, is. And so that's how I've got to where I'm at right now and doing what I'm doing.
I like that. I mean, whether you're religious or not, I think there's a lot of times within our own lives that we kind of have these, I don't know, maybe mini crises that we feel that we're not doing what we're meant to do, or we're not living up to our full potential, and I think that's scary. I think we've all probably been in that situation before. But being able, I think it takes huge willpower to be able to step back and to say, whether it's recognize that maybe I lack faith right now, or to step back and to say, maybe I'm weak in this specific spot, and kind of take a look at where you are and then pivot and move forward, and not get stuck in this, I wasted 4 years of my life doing this one thing that I didn't particularly like, and whatever else. And all of that has made you who you are today. Now pivot to something better and grow from it. And I think that's an awesome thing to see in other people, as well as recognizing a problem or recognizing an opportunity and saying, that is what I'm interested in, and I'm gonna pursue that. And so I think that's really commendable. And I think there's, in today's day and age, when they talk about toxic masculinity and all these different types of things, that it's almost like, being masculine is bad. I don't believe that at all. I believe that you can be masculine and gentle, and masculine and smart, and masculine and tough, and masculine and whatever you're doing. And I think it's just finding that, and like you had said, teaching that to not only those that come after us, our kids. Jared and I's kids range from 6 to newborn, almost 7 to newborn. And so we're at this point to where we're really building up these creatures, right? These creatures of habit, these little humans. What are they going to think? What kind of confidence are they going to lead? How are we going to help direct them to live their fullest potential? So I really like that story in that path, basically, and where you're going. Yeah,
one thing I like about your story is that you've had this traumatic experience in your past, and really, I think a lot of people fall into the scenario where they just kind of do things because maybe that's what's expected of them. And in your case, the mix of trauma, and then also what was expected of you, you just came to a point where you're like, I can't do this. I need to. And also, it seems like several things collided at once, and it was also like maybe this faith crisis at the same time. And you're just like, okay, I need to do what I want to do. And it sounds like you just took a step back and said, okay, I need to do something else. And then, from what our conversation earlier, you said you still go to that church with all those folks. So maybe you rediscovered your faith. And that's sometimes important too, to rediscover our faith. And that's something that I think is so important, is that, if you, believe in God and Jesus Christ and in the scriptures or whatever it is, I think that we need to reaffirm that on a daily basis, or even, a very regular basis. I think a lot of times we get complacent and we go through the motions, and we just go to church and we just, do the thing, but really inside we're not feeling it. And that can lead to, at the end of, down the road, you're like, what am I even doing? I'm just doing this out of habit. And then you just stop going, which is, I think, happened to a lot of people during COVID. Churches shut down, and they're just like, well, why was I even going in the first place? Because it was just habit. And now that I'm out of the habit, I have no reason to go, because they have no relationship with God. So I think that's so important to continue doing that.
So
that's actually a fantastic point.
Yeah.
That's all I was going to say.
No, I was going to ask you, so in this journey, you've obviously learned a lot, and you've grown. Today's day and age, masculinity and kind of these masculine attributes can be, portrayed as aggression and anger and domineering and mean or bullying other men or whatever, or disrespectful to women. I don't think it's any of those specific things, but and maybe in some aspects, but what does masculinity look like for you? How does that?
Yeah.
So masculinity as I've come to take time to think about it, and like I said, how culture portrays it, we constantly see that domineering, aggressive, alpha male type that treats everything like it's his property, from his girlfriend to anything else, and will do anything to overstep anybody to get what he wants. That caricature that culture wants to portray, due to whatever basis they have for it, is just not accurate whatsoever. True masculinity to me boils down to four things, and that's kind of what I mentioned, Jared, when we talked.
Yeah, let's go through those. Those are great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first thing really that a man does is a man pursues. He pursues his purpose, and then he pursues his relationships. As men, we were created by God to be active, to be men that pursued not just the day-to-day things that we need, like our food and our shelter and all those different things as you look through ancient history and such, but to also pursue those relationships in our lives, those relationships with our wife, with our kids, with our friends, our brothers and sisters, and even our relationship with God. I mean, God desires us to pursue after him. It's the whole idea of that relationship that we have, just like a child and a father. I love it when my kids run up to me when I get home from work and say, "Oh, Daddy's home," and they give me a big hug and want to talk and play and do whatever. It's that same aspect. We should be pursuing God that way, where each and every day we're pursuing the purpose that he has for us. And so when I think about purpose, like I said, that a man pursues his purpose. Like I said, I was pursuing what I thought was my purpose, but I had no idea. I was pursuing the wrong thing, and I wasn't happy. I think if you find what makes you happy and you find what gives you that peace and that joy, that's the purpose that God has for you, no matter what it is. And you should pursue after it 110% and get after it and get going for it. And so that's the first key foundation I established for what a man truly is a man pursues. Now, some people do take that as, okay, well, you got that competitive edge. Yeah, men are competitive. I'm a very competitive guy when it comes to sports or games or whatever it is. I want to win. I mean, our church has started doing like dodgeball games after church on like every other week or so. And I go in there with the full intention of winning. I want to win, but it adds to that fun. I mean, that's a guy thing. We play with some of the ladies and younger ladies in the church, and you could see that their drive is just not there to win. So they like sort of get over in the corner and sort of stay there. But as guys, we're naturally born to pursue victory, to pursue that excellence. And so that's what established it for me. Is like, okay, I got to figure out what my purpose is. And then I got to pursue after those relationships. A lot of, going back to, like I said, how culture determines masculinity, how they describe masculinity. You remember the Gillette ad that they came out with a couple years back, I think it was. And they personified men as just that they're just going to go after everything and going after women, going after all this. And yes, we pursue our wives and those that we are attracted to, if we're dating or whatever it is, we pursue after them. Yes, that's part of it. But then when we get married and we establish that family, that pursuit should not stop. And I think that's where a lot of guys make their mistakes, is that pursuit stops. I'm like, oh, well, I'm married now. But I saw a tweet the other day from a guy I follow, and he says, never stop romancing your wife, never stop pursuing your wife. And that's very true.
Yeah.
I mean, we always talk about the honeymoon phase or whatever it is. And you're like, oh, well, they're out of the honeymoon phase. They've been married for 3-4 years. I'm going on 10 years this year being married. And it's just like, I now have a new drive to make it like those first couple of years when I was everything was like, okay, I want to make my wife happy. I want to take her on dates. I want to do all this. I mean, of course, when kids come around, they sort of change those schedules up a little bit, but that idea of pursuit should never stop. And it shouldn't be for our kids. It shouldn't be for our friendships that we have. That pursuit should be there. So that's the first thing I established in that.
I like that.
And
I was just gonna say I like that the pursuit portion of that. I think it, in my mind, what I'm kind of hearing is just being an active person. You know, when I think about, biblically, I think about the Lord giving the parable of the talents, where he gives people different, it's a parable of a guy who gives people different amount of coins, and then he comes back later and he's like, okay, what'd you do with that? And so the Lord expects us to go out there and get it and be I mean, I don't necessarily think that that's just manliness, but I think that that is an aspect of what we should be. And when you see a pursuit, I mean, go out and get it. Go out and get your passions. Pursue the things that you want, and be actively engaged in a good cause. And so I totally agree with that.
Yep. And then I moved on from there. I was like, okay, what's the second thing that a man needs to do? And so I moved into a true man will provide. I mean, that's part of the key of why we were created the way we are, is that men should be the ones out there providing for their families, but even not just for married men, even single men that will be listening to this. You got to provide, even thinking ahead, like that whole idea of purpose, that whole idea, if you are pursuing a marriage, you need to be thinking ahead of that and saying, okay, what do I need to do now to provide for my future wife, whether you've met her or you haven't? What do I need to do now to provide for my kids? And bettering yourself. So you're providing for yourself, and it boils down to three areas: physical, spiritual, and emotional. I mean, those are three things we should be providing for our families. Providing, yes, of course, the necessities: a warm house to stay in, warm clothes, a car that runs properly, and food, all those necessities that we need for life, but also providing for the emotional needs. And that's where a lot of guys, I think, struggle. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I was raised, the time I had with my dad, he was very much the old style of, okay, don't show your emotions, don't show weakness, don't show this. And I'm not saying I am one that cries at the drop of a hat. I'm not, but there is a time where emotions are necessary. There's a time where some vulnerability should be shown by men. And that's something that I strive to do with my son is, okay, understand now, yes, you're mad. Okay, your sister did something to you and you're upset. Okay, his first reaction is to go out there and just start beating up on her. I'm like, okay, I know you're 3, but let's start working on that now. Your answer is not right on that. And then there's times where it's like, okay, should you be crying about this? Okay, no, or yes. Okay, what's made you upset? And let's sort of work those things out, and teaching him that, okay, there is a time for emotions to be shown, but there's also a time where emotions need to be checked to get something done. And so that idea of providing him that emotional support that he needs, knowing that emotions naturally aren't bad, because that's another thing culture strives to do, is that men are they're animals that don't show any emotion. They don't care about anybody, when that's just not the case. I mean, we should care about those around us and show those emotions.
I think a lot of times too, in media and TV shows and everything else, they always portray the man or the father as some imbecile, right? They portray him as like, some dummy that can't, would be nothing and wouldn't be able to survive alone if they didn't have other people to support them and to do everything for them, or to cook and to clean and everything else.
Basically, just they portray the man as another one of the children.
Yeah, which I've never liked that. I've never liked that. I've felt that that's demeaning to my own masculinity and to manhood in general. And to say, well, what if it was the opposite way around? What if it was like they were portraying, a wife like that? That would be incredibly insulting. And so I've talked with my wife about that a lot, and we watch a show, and I'm like, am I like that? And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, okay, well, maybe that's good, or how can I be better at a certain one thing or the other? So, yeah, really interesting. I like that.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point, because you think about how often that's our way of unwinding, is watching TV, and we're allowing ourselves to question ourselves based on some character on a show. And so sometimes it's even necessary, and I'm striving to do this for myself. Here recently, I've been thinking about this. Just sometimes, instead of watching TV, let's just turn it off and either talk or read, or, like I said, I can work on different stuff for my site, doing something that's more productive than just watching TV. Now, TV is not bad, but what am I doing? What am I using my time for? Because then I do find myself, just like you, Ethan, questioning, okay, am I like that? Yeah. Or I'll see it's like, oh, okay, I did that before not too long ago. Okay, so I must be just like this guy. So it causes you to question a little too much. But yeah, when you think about providing, we got to think about every aspect. Okay, what are we providing for our kids in regards to, like I said, their spiritual needs and their emotional needs? What are we allowing them to watch? I mean, that comes into the next part a little bit more, but it's the same thing. What am I providing for my kids to take in and influence them beyond what my wife and I do?
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that is important to me and my family, and I think Ethan and you as well, is that spiritual providing spiritually. And in my family, what we do is that at least every Monday or sometimes Sunday evenings, we get together as a family and we do some type of spiritual lesson. And I know the kids are real young at this age; they don't understand a whole lot, but they can understand a few things. And so we talk, especially this upcoming season of Easter. What we're actually planning to do is we're planning to plan out that week and every single day of what they call Holy Week. We plan on talking. Now we're not Catholics, but the Catholics celebrate Holy Week quite a bit. But I really like that aspect of it. And so every day we're going to talk about what did the Savior do this day, and use that as a teaching tool, and kind of as like a family tradition to kind of introduce that to them. And I just think it's so important because lots of men give up their basically their domestic sovereignty to the school system or to someone else or to the primary teachers or church leaders or whatever, or the scout leaders. What's like, no, you're the man of the family. You're responsible for your kids' education. You're responsible for their spiritual well-being. You're responsible for their emotional well-being, their emotional intelligence. Everything, the buck stops with me and my wife. And so, everybody else is just a support role. And I think the government sometimes flips that because maybe people are so lazy. The government says, well, we have to take control because people aren't doing their jobs. In my mind, I want the government less involved in my life and let me take the reins so that I can do that. That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that truly is. But no, that's a great point, because I mean the Bible's so clear that the husband, that the father is the spiritual head of the home. You should be the one initiating those discussions. Now my wife is phenomenal at that, and she'll teach the kids because she's home with them. She's a stay-at-home mom, and we're homeschooling our daughter, and so she gets those opportunities one-on-one to teach her. But when you think about it, like I said, Deuteronomy teaches it, and other passages. I mean, the Bible's clear. It says that if a man doesn't provide for his family, he's worse than an infidel. I mean, that's strong language that God uses to show the importance of the man providing for the family. And so that was something that just resonated with me, is that, okay, not just providing physically, because that's where a lot of men stop, is that, okay, I'll just provide physically. I'm getting the paycheck in, I'm putting food on the table, I got a house, keeping the house maintained. That's okay. That's all I'm doing. I'm checking out, instead of taking it to that next level and say, okay, I may not be the most emotional person in the world, but how am I providing? I think of a buddy of mine who had at church who has 6 daughters. So he doesn't have any sons. He has all daughters. So I'm like, whew, wow. I got one, and that's enough for me on that. So, but he's such a great example of providing for the emotional needs of his family. And that's something I've learned a lot from him just by watching him, not necessarily even talking to him, but just watching how he handles, because he's got a teenager all the way down to a newborn. And it's just like that age range that he can handle so masterfully, that shows that God is working with him. And it's been such an encouragement to me to see that, because that's something that's always been a weak spot for me. And so finding those people, like you said, to be that support, to be that help. They don't take the responsibility, but they're there to help you and to lift you up. And that comes in a little bit later in my list here, looking at that. So, but looking at, after providing, the next step in any kind of growth as a man is you're protecting. We're protectors. That's how God created us, is we're to be protectors. Yes, physically and spiritually, protecting our kids, protecting our wife, protecting their honor. I see a lot of things. It's just like a lot of guys today just don't seem to be in tune with what their wife needs, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, and the time they need. That a lot of men just think, okay, well, I gave her a gift on her birthday, or I remembered her anniversary, or whatever it is. And they think that's enough, when the wife deep down inside, she's like, I just want him to give me time. I just want to spend time with him. I just want to talk with him. All I want to do. give you an example, a little story from my life. My wife, she's a headstrong woman. She knows what she wants and she will pursue to get it, but she is an amazingly supportive wife as well. And as a young man, I thought, okay, every Valentine's Day or every birthday, I had to get her flowers. And so one day I was like, okay, she was working part-time at the library. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go get some flowers. I'm going to go surprise her at the library. And it was just funny because I walked in thinking, okay, great. I'm doing this romantic thing. It's going to be great. And I see the look on her, like a look on her face when I walk in. She's like, what are you doing? And she was just not impressed. She's like, why did you get me these? She's like, do you know how much these cost? I'm like, well, yeah, I just paid for them. She's like, you could have just taken me out to eat, or you could have just saved that money. We could have just spent time together. She's like, that's all I need.
That's not her love
she was
language.
Just straightforward with me. She's like, no, yeah, it's not. Yeah, exactly. And she's like, that's all I need from you is I just want time with you. She's like, that's all I want. And she was laid out straight for me. But some ladies don't do that. Some ladies aren't that straightforward. And so men are left guessing. So if there's no communication, you don't know what to do to not only provide, but also to protect them. Okay, what weaknesses do you have spiritually that I can help you in, that I can encourage you in, that I can lift you up in? What do I need to pray for you about? I mean, we think that we're connected at the mind as husband and wife, but we're not. There has to be that communication so we know, what are we protecting them in? What are we doing for them? And the same with our kids. I mean, my kids are totally different people. My son's very laid back. My daughter is super energetic and straightforward, social. I mean, she will talk to anybody. My son's more reserved. So, okay, so how am I going to protect them? Knowing my daughter's very social, I got to teach her, okay, look, you can't just run up to everybody. I mean, there's one day she ran up to the garbage guys picking up our trash. I mean, we didn't even know we were in the house. She ran outside, just ran up to the street to go talk to them just because she wanted to meet them. I'm like, sweetie, you can't do that. So teaching her, like I said, how to channel that in and say, yes, I want you to be social, but I also have to protect you too. And so using that as a teaching opportunity. And so just different things like that, that there's so many things that like Ethan, you said about men in media, they're always portrayed as imbeciles. They're always portrayed as they don't think, they don't do anything productive. And that's very true in those stories, but that's not how men should be. Men should be thinking ahead. We should be thinking into the future. Okay, I got to set my daughter up to find the right man. I've got to set my son up to be the right man. I've got to help protect my wife if she's in situations where I'm not there. I mean, what am I doing to protect them in every aspect? And some guys just don't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a powerful thing. Like when you talk protection, that includes so many things, and really part of what we've really tried to do on our podcast is really provide a lot of different experiences and ideas for guys of kind of how to do that. We talked about one of our recent episodes is about home readiness and tactical readiness, how prepare for situations in your home if something were to arise. We've talked, actually our next episode after the one we do with you, I believe it's about love languages and how to do that correct communication with your wife. And then, protecting your kids from stuff on the internet. I mean, this is something that, well, my parents, they didn't know about because, they were just so new to the internet. It's like, oh, the internet, it's a new thing. But now we know that there's a lot of stuff out there. And so, it's a different world. Even when your kids are playing games, if my kids are playing Minecraft, I don't want them chatting with anybody or doing anything, online, because someone could say mean things, and you got to prep your kids to prepare for a situation where someone does say something like that or send them something So there's a lot of that out there, and it's just important for us as fathers to have our heads on a swivel and be aware of what's going on. Don't be passive, be active, and that goes back to the first one that you said.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick break and say thank you for listening to this episode and invite you to support us on Patreon. As a loyal supporter, you will get exclusive access to 2 additional episodes per month, which are not released to the public. You can find the link to our Patreon page in the episode description. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, I like...
Yeah, that's something... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as we're talking about this, and as you were talking, Aaron, kids are so, in my experience, they're so impressionable. I mean, it's like they hear something and they lock onto it, and it's like my kids will watch a movie and they'll be quoting half of the movie back to me, and because and I'll watch a movie, it's in the background, and I won't even remember what it says. And language and how we speak came across my mind whenever we were talking about this. My son is 6 years old, and he hears stuff at school all the time. And, he goes to elementary school, and I guess there's all the way up to fifth graders on the bus. And he came home from the bus the other day, and he was like, "Dad, the kids on the bus, in the back of the bus, were not saying very nice things." And I was like, "Well, what were they saying, buddy?" And he and his little brother and little sister were standing right there, and he goes, "I don't want to say in front of them." And I was like, "Okay, all right." So my wife pulled him off to the side and was like, "Well, what were they saying?" And we were trying to talk with him, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was just like, where are these kids hearing these types of things? And it's not like these kids were 15-year-olds either. They were maybe a year, 9 years old, and you have kids cursing and all this kind of stuff, and kids just soak all this stuff up. I don't curse, and so whenever I can, I don't know, maybe I'm watching TV or something like that, and I hear cursing, it's just kind of like, I have the mental fortitude to say, okay, and just slough it off. But if my kids hear that, they don't particularly know what it means. They don't know what it is, and not to say it and everything else. And so they'll pick up on these things, and they're a lot more impressionable. And so just being able to protect them, and like you said earlier, with things that they watch, protect them. Make sure that they are they're being monitored and be actively engaged in what they're learning and everything else, and just keep that communication open. If they feel like they can come and talk to you about something, then I think you're doing a good job as a parent. Whenever my son came to me and told me that, I was like, well, good job. I think I gave him like a treat or something like that, and was just like, hey, great job telling me about it. And you weren't saying those things, were you? And he's like, no, of course not. And I was like, okay. We are respectful to people. We are kind to people. And so it's just something to be careful of. Just a kind of a word to the wise, and a little bit of a warning is be careful. Even, like if the kids if they're in the same room and you're watching some TV show, they might not be paying attention, but they're definitely hearing it and they're soaking it up.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead.
I just have a funny story. One time we were watching Lord of the Rings when my son was real young, and he walked in the room right when there was like an orc or something like that, and just like going at the camera, and he saw it and he just lost his mind. He was probably like 1.5 or 2. And I was like, oh man, he's gonna be traumatized for the rest of his life now.
Mm-hmm. But that's something like you just said that. And I take nothing against the older generation. They had their struggles that they fought with in raising us and even raising like our parents. Like I think about our grandparents, they had their struggles that they had to protect their kids from. But just how it's just become exponential in the day and age we live in because of the internet, because of streaming services, because of TV, and the amount of content that these kids can get free at such a young age. Like you said, I didn't know some of those words when I was that age. I didn't know a lot of the stuff that these kids know nowadays. It's just like, where are you picking this up from? And so I was talking to somebody at one of my stores the other day, and he's like, Aaron, he's like, I want to be a good dad. He's a young guy. He's got a young kid. And he's like, I want to be a good dad. He's like, but I'm working so hard. I've got 2 jobs trying to make ends meet. And I'm so tired when I get home. Like, well, I understand that. I get it. We all are tired when we get home from work. That's part of work, is that you're physically and mentally exhausted. I was like, but you can't stop. I was like, you can't shut off when you're home, because you don't know what you're going to miss in regards to your kids and in regards to your spouse or your girlfriend or whatever the situation is at hand. I was like, we can't stop. I was like, as much as we want to take time off, and there's time for us to relax and unwind and sort of just decompress from a day, but if you see something that is involved with your kids, I was like, you've got to take action on it. I was like, because if once you let it slide and you let your kid get away with it, or you let yourself get away with it and just say, I'll deal with it later, you're going to find it easier the second time you do it. And it's just like, that's not, I mean, as hard as it is, and I'm not saying I am perfect. There's days where I get home like, I don't want to do a thing. And I have slipped on some things like that before. And it's just like, man, how quickly our kids can learn that and say, okay, well, dad's too tired, so I can get away with this now. And like I said, I love my daughter to death, and she is a sweetheart, but she knows how to use that system to her advantage. She can see when mom's really, really exhausted from the day she had, or dad's really exhausted. Okay, I can sneak around and get some extra time doing this, or get away with something here, because she is a master at it. And like I said, it's just teaching her, okay, look, you have to respect that mommy and daddy are tired, but you still need to do the right thing. It's just like that's required of you. And so that's a way we need to protect them, as well as even protect them from themselves, because we're all born with that natural desire to get what we want and do what we want and do it however we want to do it. We need to train them up in the way, like, hey, look, I could get away with it, but should I? And trying to develop that in themselves, so even protecting them from themselves is a whole nother level too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
And so looking at that brought me to my final point that I've built up in my personal philosophy of masculinity and my personal understanding of masculinity, is that true men will partner up. Okay. So number one, of course, we partner up with our wives. I mean, that's a vital relationship that must be protected, that must be nurtured, that must be enjoyed, is our relationship with our wife. And so for those listening that are single, don't just grab the first girl you come across. Make sure you know that that's the one God has for you. Take your time. You may say, well, Aaron, I'm in my 30s. Okay, fine. Just take your time. Don't rush into it. Because for me personally, this is my personal view on it and my personal study on it, is I don't see divorce as an option. I don't. Trust me, like I said, with my background, my wife could have easily left me for all the stupid stuff I did. And socially speaking, you would not blame her for it. But she chose to stick it out, and I've strived to rebuild that trust with her. And that's a testament to her. Like I said, I don't deserve that, but she stuck with me, and she's like, I'm not going to divorce you. She's like, we get to work through some stuff, but we will. So that's one reason we have to partner up with the right woman. And I know a lot of guys always joke about why I married up, and I hope you do. I hope you do find somebody that's even better than you, because that's what takes you up to the next level as well. But we need to be setting the pace. And so as we partner up with our wives, that's the first and foremost. But number two is we have to partner up with other men. We have to have that brotherhood around us. I mean, you guys are brothers, so you've got that natural flesh bond of brotherhood, but also it seems like you guys get along incredibly well. You work well together. You have that bond of not just blood brotherhood, but also same purpose, same drive. And that's an amazing thing to see. So we have to have men in our lives that both are younger and both are older. I look at my church, and I've got men that are a couple years younger than me that I'm really close with. And I've got men that are in their 60s that I'm really close with, that I consider brothers, that I have not only to look up to, but also to help encourage. So it's that balance that we have in bringing up other men, but also looking to other men and saying, okay, I want to be like him. I want to be in this area of life. I want to be like him, because he's got it nailed down. So we can bond with each other. We can work with each other to gain that next level for everybody. And it has to be that joint effort, both with the spouse and with the other brothers in our life, that is going to take a man to the next level. We can't do it on our own. And that's the whole thing. Yes, personal grit and personal determination does play a part, but we have to have that support system. Otherwise, we are going to fail in one way or another.
Yeah. One of the sayings I've always loved is that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I think that, you're talking about partnership with your spouse. It's so important. But one thing I wanted to specifically hit on is that, like, that brotherhood of men and just people that you surround yourself with. And that's kind of me and Ethan starting our Brothers Creed. The brothers aren't just me and Ethan. We really want to form a brotherhood here of folks that want to improve themselves and want to build their own creeds. And I feel like your creed is never fully finished. You can always refine that. And even if you've got something down, like say you've got humility down pat, you're going to need to remember that and remind yourself of that in another 2 months. Because we constantly need to be feeding ourselves, we're reminding ourselves, remembering, and just building and nourishing that creed and being better men. And I think that's one of the main purposes of our podcast. And that very important last tenet that you mentioned is that's so important, to have that network of support, because you are, what do they say? You are the average of the 5 closest people to you. And so if we can surround ourselves with good people and listen to good things, and if folks can listen to our podcast or your podcast, and they can say, hey, that was really inspiring, I like that, or that was an interesting point of view, or that was an interesting and entertaining podcast, that's what we aim for. So absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just quickly review. So the first one was to pursue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was to provide.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then protect.
Mm-hmm.
And then partner.
Yep.
So those
you passed.
I've been listening.
There you go.
So the four P's, right?
Yep.
I really like how you kind of formulated and stepped through each one of those. Started with one thing and then said, well, it's kind of like the 5 whys. You ask, well, why? Well, why? And you ask why when you want to drill down to the actual reason of why you want to do something. You ask a bunch of whys, and that'll lead you to kind of the most pinpointed spot of a reason of why you're going to do something. So, I think personally having something to look forward to, and I don't know when you had started thinking about these different tenets of masculinity or manlyhood that you have kind of walked through, but I think each person individually needs to say, well, who do I want to be, and then set some goals to achieve that, to be that person. Whether it's, like you said, somebody in the community or someone at church or whatever else, do I want to be like that person, or what does that person do specifically that I want to emulate or be like? One question that I was going to ask, I'm sure, and you've been in this situation, I'm sure there's some listeners out there that maybe are in a similar situation where they don't have a fatherhood, manly role model or figure in their life. Where would you suggest that someone find that in their life if they're thirsting for it and they want to have that interaction?
That's actually a fantastic question on that, because when my dad left, we weren't in church. We weren't active in any real church activity or anything like that, membership or whatever. And so I was sort of like just out there by myself, just like, okay, what do I do? Now, thankfully, I had my grandpa there for a couple years before he passed, and he felt it his necessity. And that was my first introduction to a true man, was my grandpa, because he saw a need in me and said, I don't care what I have to do, I've got to take care of him. And he ended up coming down with cancer and was in the hospital for a little bit. And I remember overhearing him. He didn't do it in front of me, but I was walking down the hall to his hospital room, and he said, and I overheard him talking to my mom, and he says, like, I want to get out of here. I need to be there for Aaron. I need to be there to teach him, to guide him. And he was heartbroken because he couldn't. So anybody out there that is in that aspect where you don't have a father, you don't have a true masculine, true man in your life to teach you and to guide you, especially young men, look to your grandparents if you can. Look to an uncle or somebody in your close family first. And if you don't have anybody there, the next step for me was we ended up getting into a good church, and the youth pastor of that church saw the need in me to have that example, and he took me under, teaching me some basics and teaching me some things and spending some time with me. So if you can, like I said, if you don't have that family that's close by that can help take that role up, then try to find yourself a good solid church to get into, where you can find a pastor or you can find an older man, because the Bible's very clear in I believe it's 1st or 2nd Timothy, I can't remember exactly where, that he was telling Timothy, who was a young man, a young pastor, saying, look, you need to respect the older men in your church. They need to be the ones teaching the younger men. The older ladies teach the younger ladies. It's that same mentorship sort of principle. So look for an older man that can take you under and spend some time with you. Take him out to coffee or take him out to lunch and say, I just want to talk to you. I need some help in some things. But the first thing you have to do is you've got to be open. You've got to be open to having that mentor, because if you find somebody that is going to mentor you, they're going to keep you accountable. And if you're not ready for it, then you're going to find yourself hurt and you're going to find yourself leaving. So you've got to make sure I'm ready and this is exactly what I need. And then you can pursue that person that you need, whether it be family or at a church or in the community, wherever you can. Just find somebody that you trust, that you respect, and that you look up to provide that fill in your life there. But you've got to be ready for it.
That's an excellent thing. I totally agree. I think one thing I would add to that is that scouting could be a good option to have some male role model leadership. Ethan and I did an episode on scouting a while back. We're both Eagle Scouts, and we got introduced to lots of good men in that program, and so that was great. But Aaron, your philosophy here and your different steps. They are easy to remember, and I think they're so powerful in how we can develop that manliness and that masculinity and be true men of God. Or if you're not a man of God, just be a true man and be a better man. And so that's so powerful and so important. Kind of here towards the end, we always ask our guests a question about their personal creed. Now, a creed is a set of beliefs or principles that guide you in your life. And we talked about some of those today, but we wanted to hear maybe a piece of your own personal creed, if you could share that with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, this came from our first discussion setting this up, is that I never really was posed the question of, okay, what is my personal creed or my personal philosophy for these things? So it made me sit down and think about it. I mean, I've been thinking about what we just shared this evening on this, but I was like, okay, if I had to boil it down to a basic principle, I actually came across 1 Kings chapter 2, where David was talking to Solomon near the end of his life. He brings Solomon in. He says, look, he says, I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong, therefore, and show thyself a man. So I developed my personal creed from those principles that he shared with him. And I've put it down in writing. When you challenged me to do that, even though you didn't say I challenged you to do it, you said I should do it. So I did.
Yeah, good.
But exactly. The way I wrote it down was always ready, always strong, always manly. Because if you break it down, I go the way of all the earth. Every one of us is going to die. So we have to be ready, not just for that, but we have to be ready for anything that life throws. We have no idea what a day brings forth. I woke up this morning not knowing what was going to happen from the time I left for work to the time I got home to the time I sat down to do this with you guys. We have to be ready for everything. But then he says, be thou strong, therefore. So we're always strong, always striving to build physical strength as well. I mean, that's one thing that a lot of men today lack. And I'm not the best at it. I'm in the process of regaining my strength and regaining my health and putting myself back on track. We have to be always strong, but then we always have to be manly. He says, show thyself, exemplify thyself as a man. He said, because that's what you have to do. You're always ready, you're always strong, and you're always manly. And so that actually how I developed just the other day, to wrote that down. It's like, okay, that's going to be my personal creed, because it exemplifies everything we discussed tonight. It's a simple way to remember it. And it's just one way for me to keep it at the forefront of my mind, what I need to be and who I need to be.
That's awesome. I think one of the keys that you said there is keeping it at the forefront of your mind, and having it accessible, memorized, and thoughtfully engaged in everything that you do. Kind of carry that in your heart. Whatever that's your personal creed, and as others have their own personal creed and continue to develop that, carry it with you and live by those standards. Help it to really, a creed helps guide your actions. Let that guide your actions. So this has been great. I have really enjoyed your philosophies and your tenets, and sharing with us your ideas and on masculinity and how to grow that in our own life, but also how to support that not only with our children, but with partnering with other men. I think that is huge as well.
Mm-hmm.
None of us is perfect, and none of us has the exact same weaknesses or the exact same strengths. So we can all use our strengths with each other to lift each other up. And I think that is one thing that's missing in this world, and there's a huge opportunity for us to become the best that ourselves can be, the best that we can be. So where can our listeners find you, Aaron?
Yeah, you can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can just search Millennial Manliness and find me on those. You can also go to my website, www.millennialmanliness.com. I am revamping my podcast, so it'll be going live here soon. It's entitled The Thinking Man's Podcast. So I'll be going live with that, getting some old episodes put back up, and also getting formats like what we just did set up to start doing some deeper dives into some of these things. And I had to step away from it for a little bit to just make sure I was doing it the right way for the right purpose. So looking forward to bringing that back up. But you can find me, like I said, search Millennial Manliness on YouTube, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and you can find me there. So.
Yeah, definitely. We'll put your socials in the show notes, and then we'll also, for those who are listening, you can follow us at a.brothers.creed on Instagram, and we post every day. We post, and we'll definitely tag you, Aaron, in those posts, and we post some clips from the episode. We post some funny stuff. We post, different quotes or different aspects of the things that we do. So, thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and as we always say at the end of our episodes, let's build that creed together.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Aaron.
Let's do it.
Yep. Thank you, guys.